For decades, we've had this one big number to tell us how a country is doing. Gross domestic product, GDP. And if that number goes up, well, that's good news, right? We're all winning. But what if that's not the whole story? What if our obsession with making that one number bigger is actually a dangerous illusion, making us sicker, more stressed out, and, well, trashing the planet in the process?
Okay, let me start by asking you a question, and it's going to sound a little crazy. Can a massive disaster, I'm talking a huge, destructive event, actually be good for the economy? It seems impossible, but if you look at the weird, twisted logic of GDP, the answer is kind of yeah.
Just think about a huge environmental catastrophe, like the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. On one side of the ledger, you've got absolute devastation. Ecosystems wiped out, fisheries destroyed, tourism gone. But in the bizarre accounting world of GDP, all the money spent to deal with the disaster, the billions for cleanup crews, lawyers, new equipment, all of that gets added to the national income. The destruction itself, that's not subtracted. But the frantic spending to fix it, that shows up as a plus. It literally makes the economy look like it's growing. It's nuts.
So how on earth did we get stuck with such a messed up system? To really get what's going on, we have to pull back the curtain on GDP itself and see where this whole idea even came from.
Here's the key thing to understand. GDP was never, ever designed to measure happiness or health or anything like that. It was born out of crisis, forged during the Great Depression and World War II for one reason: to figure out a country's raw productive power. The goal was to know exactly how many tanks, bombs, and planes you could crank out without the whole civilian economy just falling apart. It's a tool for wartime logistics, not for human well-being.
And get this, even one of the main architects of GDP, this guy Simon Kuznets, he warned everybody right from the start. He basically said, hey, you really can't tell if a nation is doing well just by looking at this number. He knew the tool was limited, but somehow, over the years, that's exactly what we started doing.
So what happens when you take a tool designed for war and try to measure peacetime progress with it? Well, you start to get some seriously weird, even perverse outcomes. When all you care about is the speed of money changing hands, you start rewarding some pretty strange things.
This brings us to something called the broken window fallacy. It's a simple idea. Imagine a kid throws a rock and breaks a shopkeeper's window. Well, the shopkeeper has to pay a glazier to fix it. That's economic activity, right? Money changed hands. But has any new value been created? No. The shopkeeper just got back to where he started. He replaced what was lost. Yet GDP looks at that and says, hey, that's a net positive.
And this isn't just some abstract theory. This is real life. Remember Hurricane Katrina? It was an unbelievable disaster that destroyed immense amounts of actual national wealth. So what do you think happened to GDP in the months that followed? It went up. All the billions spent on reconstruction were counted as economic growth, completely hiding the fact that the country was reeling from a tragedy.
Oh, but hold on. It gets even weirder. GDP also counts something economists call defensive spending. Think about it. We spend money on building prisons because crime is up. We spend money on asthma inhalers because the air is polluted. These are costs. We're spending money to deal with problems, not because our lives are getting better. But in the world of GDP, a sick, high-crime society can actually look more prosperous on paper than a healthy, safe one. How backward is that?
Okay, so GDP counts bad things as good. But what about all the genuinely good things that it doesn't count at all? This leads us to this huge, invisible economy that our number one metric just completely pretends doesn't exist.
Take a good look at this number, $11 trillion. What do you think that represents? It's not the market cap of some tech giant. It's not the value of a stock market. It's something way, way more fundamental to our lives.
That $11 trillion? That's the estimated annual value of all the unpaid work happening in our homes every single day. The cooking, the cleaning, raising kids, taking care of elderly parents. The actual work that holds our entire society together. It's the foundation that the real economy is built on. And what value does GDP assign to it? A big fat zero. Nothing.
And let's be really clear about who's doing the lion's share of this invisible labor. Globally, women perform over 76% of it. So by treating all this essential work as worthless, GDP isn't just a flawed metric. It's a system that actively devalues the massive contributions of women and helps lock in gender inequality.
So, what's the real world, human cost of letting ourselves be guided by this one broken number? The consequences aren't just on paper anymore. They're becoming impossible to ignore.
Look closely at this chart because it tells a powerful story. That top line is GDP per person in the US, and you can see it's just been climbing steadily for decades. But the bottom line is something called the Genuine Progress Indicator, or GPI. It starts with GDP, but then it subtracts the bad stuff, like the cost of pollution and crime. See how they move together until about the 1970s, and then they split apart. This is a huge deal. It suggests that for the last 50 years, our growth has become uneconomic. The costs are now starting to outweigh the benefits.
And we can feel this divergence in our own lives, can't we? This endless push for more GDP has created what some are calling a burnout economy. It's gotten so bad that in many developed countries, nearly half of all new disability claims are now linked to mental health issues like anxiety and depression, fueled by this constant pressure to just produce more. Okay, so that's the problem, and it's a big one. But here's the really exciting part. A global movement is already happening to fix this. Let's dive into the alternatives that are completely redefining what prosperity really means.
The whole idea is that we don't have to be stuck with just one number. We can have a whole dashboard of metrics, like you'd have in a car, to see how everything's running. We've got things like the Human Development Index, which looks at health and education. We have the GPI, which we just saw, for sustainable welfare. And then you've got amazing stuff like Bhutan's Gross National Happiness Index, which actually measures things like community and ecological health.
And this is not just some academic theory, okay? This is happening right now. There's a growing group of governments, we're talking New Zealand, Scotland, Wales, Iceland, that have actually formed something called the Wellbeing Economy Governments Alliance. They are actively shifting their national goals away from just growing the economy and towards improving the well-being of their people and the planet.
And let me give you a perfect, concrete example of how this works. In Wales, a massive £1.4 billion motorway project was on the table. But instead of just looking at the short-term jobs, they evaluated it against their well-being goals for future generations. And you know what? They canceled it. They decided that prioritizing short-term GDP wasn't worth the long-term damage to the environment. That is a fundamentally different kind of decision.
And these examples are popping up all over. New Zealand created the world's very first well-being budget, putting money directly towards things like mental health and child poverty. Scotland has a national framework that literally includes goals for kindness and dignity. And cities like Amsterdam are using a model called donut economics to make sure everyone's basic needs are met without overshooting our planet's limits. The future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed yet.
So this all leaves us with one last really powerful question. For so long, we've been told that the goal is just to make the economy bigger. But what if the goal was to make it better? What we choose to measure, well, that reflects what we truly value as a society. So if we finally change what we measure, we might just change the entire world we create.